Hello, everyone, and welcome to the November 10th edition of the Decatorish.com Twitch show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher Dan Wisenhunt. Today, we're going to be talking to candidates for the runoff, which is November 30th for Atlanta City Council District 5. The candidates are Mandy Mahoney. Mandy, how are you this morning?
Really great. I'm glad to be here. I will caveat that with I've got a sick little second grader home, so
Well, that's all right.
hopefully things will be quiet in my world
Hopefully,
here
he
this
will
hour.
get well soon. As a
Thank
parent, I
you.
understand what that's like. And the other candidate is Liliana Bakhtiari. I want to just open this by saying that Liliana agreed to do this forum last week. In the last 2 days, I have contacted her several times, asking her if she intends to do the forum still, if she is not going to do the forum. Liliana Bakhtiari has not so much as returned an email or a phone call on that point. So, our rule is that if a candidate does not show up to a forum, that the forum will go on as planned. That didn't happen very much in our lead up to the November 2nd elections. All of the candidates showed up to the previous District 5 forum. You can find that on our YouTube channel. But I'm disappointed because when you're an elected official, no matter what you have going on in your life, you can't blow off meetings and things like that. I realize a forum is not the same thing as a city council meeting, but when you make your word to someone that you're going to participate in something, you should honor that, or at least have the decency to explain why you can't honor it. And neither of those things happened in this case, so I'm very disappointed in that. But with that out of the way, we're going to move on and continue with our forum that we had planned for today. So Mandy Mahoney is in this race. Liliana Bakhtiari got about 49.5% ish of the vote. Mandy, I believe you got 18, 19%. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're correct.
Yeah, around that. So, Manny Mahoney's got an uphill battle in terms of the runoff. Runoffs are always dependent heavily on turnout. With that said, we're going to give Mandy, because we only have one candidate here, we're not going to impose time limits because there's really no point in doing that. So, Mandy, I'll let you make an opening statement and then we're going to go into our questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for hosting this so quickly. It's just a week ago today that we were still watching the election results. And so I appreciate y'all moving so quickly to get this organized. And so and I love having deep policy discussions. So I'm excited we're going to get to do that today. But just a little bit about me is that I've spent my entire career working in government and public policy because I love it. When people ask me, like, why do you want to do this? And I look at them and I'm like, public policy is my crazy. Like, it's what I know, it's what I love. At the end of the day, society changes, but until we actually have the laws and policy change to evolve with society, you can't live into the full expression of what we want to see in our community. And so I've enjoyed spending the last 20 years reweaving the social compact through public policy. And I've done that in by showing up on the team that launched the Beltline in 2005. At that point, nobody thought that you would have a big giant project like that be able to happen in Atlanta. From there, I was the city's first sustainability director. And in 2007, people would look at me, just kind of tilt their head like, what is sustainability? Heaven forbid you talk about climate change. And so it's really cool that we've evolved this much as quickly, that climate is an important thing to people. But I was thrilled to be able to be there in the foundational level to establish the Office of Sustainability and Resilience that is still thriving at City Hall today. And then I moved on from there. In the last 10 years, I have run a regional nonprofit that's based in Atlanta called the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. And what we did was work with elected and appointed officials in the 11 state Deep South to address affordable housing policy, climate change policy, and clean energy policy. And what I am deeply proud of is that I have effectively worked across the aisle. So I am a strong Democrat and have been through and through. But to get anything done in the Deep South, you got to work with Republicans. And so I have been able to figure out ways to, I think about the Venn diagram, when the overlap of the Venn diagram, that middle sweet spot where you can find agreements and then work on those common ground to address public policy for that. And once you have that foundation, it can be durable and it can be the building block for adding on further change. And what motivated me to say, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to take this knowledge and experience and what am I going to do with it? And I was walking my son to school every day before the pandemic, and he and his friend Zelda would trip and fall on a stretch of sidewalk in Eastlake on Sutton and scrape their knees. And at the same time, there was an elderly gentleman who was on a walker trying to get to the MARTA bus stop that's right there. And he was having an equally hard time as Paul and Zelda were. And I'm like, the basic city service is streets, sidewalk, infrastructure. And if we cannot even provide those basic services, how in the heck are we going to adapt to climate change? And so it's what said, I'm going to put myself back in now. I'm going to call the community to more, call my fellow policymakers to bigger visions, to hold the tension of the immediate change that we've got to have, but then also the visionary leadership that we need to be able to adapt and thrive in our society over the next 50 years. So that is what I've been running on. That is what is on my heart. And frankly, no matter what happens on November 30th, that is still how I will be spending my life. I love public policy. As wonky as it is my jam. And it is what I will continue to be doing in my career.
Thank you, Mandy. And if you're just joining us, we have candidate Mandy Mahoney, who is running in the November 30th runoff for Atlanta City Council. Her opponent, Lily Bakhtiari, confirmed her attendance on this forum last week. She did not respond to any of my messages in the last 24 hours asking if she would attend today's event. She didn't tell us she was dropping out, but she didn't show up. So that is why there's only one candidate for people who are just joining us. We aren't going to be taking questions from the audience for this one today. We've limited our chat. We got wind that somebody was going to try to bombard our Twitch stream today with stuff that, frankly, we need to do some more reporting on. So we're not going to, indulge that today, but we do have questions submitted by readers that were submitted on Facebook, so we're going to go with that. And I'm going to start with one of my questions, which is, runoff elections are going to depend pretty heavily on turnout. You, as we discussed, have a pretty uphill battle. Liliana almost won it outright. What are you going to do to get voters to the polls on November 30th? Or on November 17th, because that's when early voting starts.
Right. Or on next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. Right.
Yes. So I think that it's important just to say to voters, this is the first election that is testing the new voter registration law, SB 202. And so that's why this is the first time that we're having a runoff for a major election like this that is this tight. And so moving on, what am I going to do is your question to me. I am fortunate to have an amazing army of committed volunteers. I knocked on over 8,000 doors before running up to the general, and I did not hire paid staff. I had a few high schoolers, but I required everyone who was out with me to be vaccinated. And to my knowledge, I'm the only campaign who required vaccinated canvassers. Well, the good news is all those people who are with me are chomping at the bit to get back out there. So we are getting back out there, knocking on doors of people that voted, knocking on doors of people that may not have voted because life happens. And but they had said they were going to vote for me. Because what I'm finding is a lot of people just have no idea there's a runoff. And so we'll also be doing the traditional things of sending people mail, phone banking. My son's best friend's grandmother loves to call seniors like herself and talk to them about me. And so Miss Faye is already starting to call her senior friends. And I'm just gonna, so all that to say is I ran a grassroots campaign. I'm gonna keep running a grassroots campaign and focus on getting people back out there.
So the vote breakdown was pretty interesting. Liliana did really well in both counties. Did particularly well in Fulton,
Yeah.
where if it had just been an election in Fulton, she would have won outright. Um, so in order to win, you're gonna have to convince everyone who voted for other candidates besides the two of you to vote for you and potentially pull some of her voters away as well. So, how do you plan to convince voters who chose other candidates to vote for you in this runoff election?
So I am in this because I love Atlanta and I want durable public policy solutions. And I have a reputation in the community as someone who gets things done, someone who I'm a person of my word. When I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. I don't overextend myself, and I surround myself with really good people. And so, yeah, that reputation is out there in the community. And what I'm doing now is asking friends of friends, the peer-to-peer validation, people that had known candidates, Doug, Sam, or Katie before, because they had been on the PTA with them or involved in another way. Their kids were friends. Working with them who have come to me and said, I'm excited about you. What can I do to help? And they are now my amplifiers. So it's another layer of that grassroots engagement. I think of it as a spider web. So we're trying to send out, my son loves Spider-Man, and he has this shooter, right, that he ping, and he imagines the spider webs going out. That's how I'm imagining these people that are helping me, is that each of them is shooting out their own spider web through their network saying, Mandy's awesome. Mandy will bring good leadership. Mandy's a person that you can rely on with high integrity. She's going to be ready to get the job done on day one. And from what I am hearing, I think that amplification is working. And again, we'll be doing the other standard things of mail, phone calls, etc. But that peer-to-peer is what I'm most excited about, and just beyond thankful for the excitement and the love that is continuing to pour out from the community for me.
Okay. So we're sitting here. If you're just joining us, so we got a nice crowd today for 10:30 in the morning on a weekday. I'm proud of that. If you're just joining us, this is the Decatur's Twitch show. Mandy Mahoney is one of the candidates in the November 30th runoff. The other is Liliana Bakhtiari. Liliana agreed to participate in this forum last week. She did not show up today, so that is why you only see one candidate here. But this is a great segue into our next question, which is about engagement. As part of if you're elected, one of your most important jobs is going to be showing up and being there for your constituents. If you're elected, how do you plan to engage with your constituents? Will you or someone from your office regularly attend neighborhood and MPU meetings? Will you hold town halls? What other ways will you make yourself available to voters and constituents?
I am so glad you asked me that question. So, as I had shared earlier, I've spent the last 20 years in public policy, and I have lived through the good, the bad, and the ugly of how do you do stakeholder engagement. And I just want to share one anecdote with you. So, I was on the team that launched Beltline. My husband and I, our very first date was actually after a highly contentious public meeting about the Beltline in the middle school. So, it's just stakeholder engagement and community engagement is just part of my core. So the practical things that I want to introduce is to ask the neighborhood associations to restructure the calendar. Because, for instance, last night you had East Atlanta and Cabbagetown at the same time. The night before that, Reynoldstown and Eastlake were the same time. So what I do is I have like my phone and my computer on Zoom and tuning in to like based on what's going on to like listen to the key points. It's mentally exhausting to do that, but it's important. And in that, but I've talked to some of the neighborhood association presidents, and I'm like, have y'all ever thought about your schedule? Like, it's not setting us up for success right now, having us overlapping. So, that's a basic practical thing. Second, in that way too, the staff, like if it's not me, but it's my staff member, like we can actually effectively cover things. The second thing that I would immediately implement is aligning with each neighborhood association president on the top 3 to 5 priorities. And the council, so I or my staff will report out on that. So for instance, the eternal question, is DeKalb Avenue ever actually going to be paved, right? Instead of some person in the audience having to remember to ask a question, like it's a known fact that the council member's office is going to report out on A, B, C, and D every single time. And I think what I have found is that consistency and ability to count on that flow of information allows for increased productivity in the relationship, increased reliability, and the rebuilding of trust. And we need to rebuild some trust in this town right now. People have a lot of trust in Natalie and her staff, but there is not a lot of trust in the other parts of the city. And I take it as my responsibility to improve that. Third. So I would love at the neighborhood level to engage the resources from Georgia Tech, Atlanta Regional Commission to start doing neighborhood scale community master planning. Because I think that the neighborhoods, we've done that in some of them, but we're at a cycle in time that it will be useful to redo those processes. And I have found that having third-party neutrals who are experts on the substantive topic to come in and facilitate the dialogue and take that facilitator role off of the neighborhood members so they're able to participate, that results in very useful output. Also, it's critical to involve artists in that. So for instance, when I was sustainability director and we did the city's first climate action plan, when we would have these meetings, we would have artists come in that would be listening to what the participants were saying and drawing it in art form on the boards. It's a woman named Julie Stewart who does this very well. And it allowed people to get outside of their linear brain and into their subconscious to really think and dream big. And that visual allowed people to build off of and figure where the common ground was. And so those are some of the tools that I think that we are just ripe for employing in the district.
Thank you. So we're going to get into some questions that came from readers on Facebook. Will you support climate change initiatives, and do you support putting a fee on carbon emissions?
Thank you for talking about climate change first. I wasn't expecting that to be the first thing. So I identify as a climate candidate through and through. And I will do everything in my power to weave the mitigation and adaptation to climate into how the city works. I also, support a fee on carbon? Yes, I'm a big fan of using market-based mechanisms to reduce our carbon emissions. I also am a big fan of the carbon tax. I don't believe we can do that at the city level. But from a philosophical standpoint, yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. And I will stop there, but if you want to talk more about where I see the top opportunities to weave in climate into policy of the city, I'd be
go for
it.
We have some time. If you could just really quickly go through those.
Yeah. So best practices from other cities show that when we're looking at building new infrastructure, being at sewer, road infrastructure, we need to be using climate modeling into how we are designing that infrastructure. Cities like Chicago, Seattle, Miami, of course, they've already been doing this, and we are not doing that. And I think that is putting us behind the eight ball, and we need to immediately require all infrastructure planning to use climate modeling in that. Secondly, under the Reid administration, when Stephanie Stuckey was resilience director, they did an outstanding world-class level resilience plan for Atlanta. And unfortunately, under this administration, it got put on the shelf and has been collecting dust. I believe that we need to pull that plan off the shelf and breathe new life into it. Atlanta often, this is an example to me of, we do a lot of planning and we never do a lot of implementation. I don't think we need to start over with the climate planning for Atlanta. I think we need to use that planning that's already been done. That plan had so much robust stakeholder engagement in the design of that plan. It has equity as the first and foremost principle from it. And it is ready to go. So I want to lift that back up and get that put in place immediately. Third, there is a lot. So we talk about new affordable housing in Atlanta a ton. Need to build new units. Yes, we do. But we also need to protect our existing affordable housing, the naturally occurring affordable housing. And in District 5, we have a tremendous amount of elderly residents who've been here since the early 60s who need to be supported to be able to age in place. Well, how in the heck does that relate to climate change? Well, what the research that the city has done and the Greenlinks Analytics has done shows that a lot of these homes do not have good insulation. They are in need of emergency repairs, like fixing their roofs. And so when you have homes that don't have good insulation, have holes in their roofs, water gets in and heat in this time of year gets out, or in the summer, cold air gets out. And it makes it really hard to live in those homes. And so we talk about, for elderly residents, are they able to pay their property taxes? That's its own huge issue. But what we also need to be talking about Atlanta is quality of housing. And what the research shows is that the elderly residents are not in healthy homes. They're in homes that can make them more sick. And as we get more high heat degree days in Atlanta, that is only going to become worse. So we need to be leaning into and providing more resources to weatherizing these folks' homes so that they can truly be able to live in a house that is healthy and safe for them to live in.
Thank you. You did mention Kasim Reed, and I meant to put this question on my list, but really quickly, Kasim Reed did not make the runoff. Andre Dickens and Felicia Moore did. A lot of people were a little surprised by that. I'd have to confess to being one of those people. I thought whatever you thought about Reed personally, he was definitely good at doing the politics and getting people out to vote for him. So I'm kind of curious, what's your interpretation of that result, and who do you plan to support for mayor?
Well, I'm going to break one of the cardinal rules of politics and actually answer your question honestly, because, well, I'll tell you first, the first question is, was I surprised? I was not surprised for this part of town, because when I was at knocking on doors with people, one of the very first things they wanted to know is exactly the question you just asked. And they, what I heard was that they hated Reed. They didn't trust Reed. They didn't think he was a changed man, and that they were excited by Andre. And that broke, I would say, in the last 2 weeks before the election. Before that, people were just kind of, oh my God, I can't believe we're here and I have to make a decision. But starting about 2 weeks in, you could feel the excitement people had for Dickens. And as I listened to where that was coming from, they were, I sense that they feel that he is visionary, honest, and shows up very authentically. And so when people ask me, well, like, who are you voting for? And at first I would give the answer of, I'm running my race. You need to make the decision. But then after a while, it's like, life is short. Like I am voting for Andre because I believe that he's bringing the kind of vision and leadership and hope and spirit that I want to see in our next mayor. Okay. And so that is why I voted for him in the general, and that's why I will vote for him on November 30th.
Well, thank you for answering that question. It's appreciated. Yeah. And as an aside, I ask this question a lot, and not just in the city of Atlanta, but I usually ask candidates two questions: who are you voting for city council or mayor, and what do you think of the city manager? And the reason I ask the first question is because I want voters to know whether these folks are going to be able to work together to accomplish their goals, whether they're supporting each other. I feel transparency is important. I know that question makes people uncomfortable, but that's kind of my job, is to ask people uncomfortable questions. The second reason I ask about city manager, which doesn't really apply in Atlanta's case, is because hiring a city manager is the most important job a city council member has in a city manager form of government, so your opinion of that individual is kind of important, since that's one of the most important jobs that you will do. Moving on. This is a question from a reader. Number of people experiencing homelessness has increased noticeably since the start of the pandemic. What can the city do to reverse that trend and care for its most vulnerable residents?
Let me just say, I think it is an absolute shame as to how abysmally the city has used the federal money that has come to support this issue area. The amount of money that the city has not used to support people in housing crisis or people that are about to be evicted is just shocking. And it is similar to what I've experienced in my past professional capacity with our inability to use weatherization funds coming out from the federal government. So first and foremost, city council has the job of providing oversight and transparency. And I think that there needs to be an audit and a commission that formally looks at why the heck has this been so god awfully done, and then changes made to the administration of how we're rolling out that funding, because those kinds of resources are going to continue to flow from the feds, and we are doing an abysmal job of using federal dollars at the city. And so that's point one. Point two is that we need to look at the homelessness issue by issue area. So your point was we have a lot more homeless, and that has been known that would be happening because the eviction crisis is now manifesting. And so we have a lot of people who are newly homeless, and there are specific intervention measures to support people who are newly homeless to get them back into stable housing and back on their feet. And the city is not going to be the magic panacea to provide all these solutions. I believe the best role of the city is to quickly and effectively pass through the funding it's getting to the agencies that are good at providing the services to people who are in housing crisis. And that's another example of where the city, we've just done a really bad job at it. And we forced some nonprofits out of business because we have not funded them effectively, and it screwed up their cash flow. And so, from a philosophical standpoint, I think that the city just needs to be a good steward by being a pass-through to support agencies like Atlanta Collaborative In-Town Ministries, for instance, to be able to do what they're good at, grow their services quickly. I also am a big fan of the model of using having hotels that are purchased to then have people to be able to be in temporary housing so that they can, that's a stopgap to then quickly move into a more permanent solution to get, to keep them from having to actually be on the streets.
Thank you. What, in your opinion, is the role of the MPU system in guiding future development and council initiatives?
So the NPU system is at its core supposed to be a forum that layer between that rolls up all the neighborhood associations and providing coherent feedback that the planning department or whomever can use to make decisions. And we've gotten into this really bad cycle that the NPU is a check the box exercise that city staff do, but is never actually used. And, even last night on the Cabbagetown call, when the gentleman who's the representative from the NPU there, he is such a hardworking, dutiful community servant from Cabbagetown. But he was like, we do all this work and then nobody listens to it. It's not like the city's voice is going to be heard or the city's going to listen to our voices at all. And what he said last night is consistently how people feel. And so it to me is just a tragedy that we are wasting the people who are most committed to our community's time, asking them to go through these crazy making processes that's not being used. And I think that just has to stop. I think that it requires us taking the recommendations of groups like CCI, who've done a deep dive on what's working and not working with the MPU system, because everybody at this point agrees that it's a broken system. So I believe that we need to take the recommendations that CCI and others have made and actually make changes to the NPU system, so that it's an effective path for the voices of the community to be heard, and that the city's actually getting something meaningful out of the citizens' voice at that point.
Thank you. What are your ideas for increasing affordable housing in the city of Atlanta?
Another of my favorite questions. And so my beef with the city currently is that we only focus on building new for sale or new owned units that are at the higher end of what we consider affordable. So that 80% AMI, which functionally translates to making $80,000 or more. And when you look at the data of what we really need, that's an important layer, but the real need in Atlanta is workforce housing for people that are making between $30,000 and $60,000 a year. And within that, we need more rental units. We need more high quality, healthy, affordable rental units. And to get at that, I would like to see the city use so there's money that the city receives through the community development block grant from HUD that other cities, like for instance, Athens, has used that to extend the city's credit for the agencies that build the multifamily rental affordable housing to then be able to close the gap of money they need to build that new property. And again, cities like Athens are already doing that, and it's working well for companies like Columbia Residential. But the private sector has approached the city about doing that, and it's fallen on deaf ears. And I think that that's just insane. I think that we need to immediately be using best practices like that, so that we can catalyze the private sector to be able to go out and do what they're good at and build more units.
Thank you. If you are joining us, this is the Decatur-ish.com Twitch show. I'm editor and publisher Dan Wisenhunt. Our guest today is Mandy Mahoney, who is running in the runoff for Atlanta City Council District 5. That election is November 30th. Early voting is going to start November 17th. You can find all of our election coverage at DecaturishVotes.com. Her opponent was invited to attend. She did confirm her attendance. She did not show up today. As is our rule, if only one candidate shows up, that's who we go with. That's the candidate that will be part of the forum, and we move forward as planned. So that's why you only see one candidate, in case you're just joining us and want to know what's going on there. Next question, Mandy. What will you do to advance pedestrian safety improvements on Memorial Drive? And that also
Hmm.
comes from a reader.
Thank you. Well, let us first take a moment and just honor the family who lost a child on Halloween. There was an 11-year-old boy who was struck and killed on Memorial at Daniel on Halloween evening. And so let me just first say that my heart and prayers continue to go out to that family, because it is any parent's worst nightmare. And unfortunately, we've gotten ourselves into a pattern in Atlanta where we're only making pedestrian improvements after a tragedy happens. There's another example of that in Rocky Ford. And that's what it took to get the pedestrian improvements that just happened like 2 weeks ago on Rocky Ford. And that is just patently wrong. We, so, you know, so what practical things would I do to address this? So Memorial is a state road. It will require effective partnership with Georgia Department of Transportation to make those improvements. The East Lake Transportation Committee of the Neighborhood Association, there's already a long list of things. There's also a long list of things from the Imagine Memorial that has not been implemented. And what I think that we need to use the things that are already on the list to find the dollars to make those pedestrian improvements immediately. And let me just stop myself, because what I'm realizing is I made an error in my opening remarks. So I said Memorial and Daniel. I'm wrong. It was Hosea and Daniel where the tragedy happened. So I apologize for misspeaking.
I do take your point that
Yeah.
often it does require somebody to get hurt or killed before any improvements are made, and I'm sure there have been pedestrian deaths along Memorial as well.
Yeah. Well, yes, thank you. And there's also so from just a practical standpoint, we need to find the money and implement more of the pedestrian access and cycling infrastructure that was imagined in Imagine Memorial. Secondly, there's this problem that the water main covers are constantly missing, and they are really dangerous. So I hear repeatedly from people who are walking when it's dark and you cannot see that the cover is about this big. Those are stolen because they're iron, and so they're valuable. But we need Watershed to come up with a better solution, because right now our sidewalks, that's a big problem. Third, I think that the city needs to change the policy decision and take back full ownership of and responsibility of sidewalks and not put it on the adjacent property owner, because that's not working. We tried that experiment. It is not working. We need to change it. We need the city to take back that. Fourth, I want to implement participatory budgeting, just like Amir Faruqi has done in District 2. And in that regard, I would be going back out neighborhood by neighborhood, asking the community to rank order what pedestrian infrastructure improvements they want to see done first, second, and third. And then using the discretionary budget that is allocated for District 5 to be spent aligned with those priorities that the neighborhood sets.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question from a reader. What steps should be taken to bring the original vision of the Beltline, a transit gateway connecting neighborhoods and providing opportunities for underserved communities, to fruition, rather than the Beltline becoming a cash cow for developers and an amenity for the well-to-do? I think there's a lot in that question, but I think you know enough about it to be able to parse it. So I'll let you
I
take that
do.
one.
I do. Yeah, and so I had shared with you at the beginning for folks who are just joining that I cut my teeth, my career on the Beltline in 2005, 2004, 2005, when Mayor Franklin decided to take it on as an idea. I was on that team. And so I was in all the conversations about the what we dreamt the city would be, or what the Beltline would be for people. And what's interesting in that period of time, nobody had any courage to touch affordable housing. It was a political like death pill. So I think it's important just to know for the history, that's one of the reasons that you didn't see effective policy for affordable housing woven in the early days. And that was a real mistake. That was a real lost opportunity that we are seeing the problems of now. And the city's got to have more courage to implement the many layers of affordable housing policy that other cities do. And one of the core pieces of that is to require inclusionary zoning. So to require developers to not just build one unit that's at the top end of the AMI, like for people making $80,000 or more, but require them to build more units and require them to truly be in the affordable house, like the workforce housing zone of 30 to 60. And then I also think that we've got a great resource in the Atlanta Land Trust that Amanda Ryan runs. And the city still has a lot of land at different parts and pieces along the Beltline that I think that the land trust model is a really great model for building new housing that can remain permanently affordable. And Amanda and her group have a great track record of doing good stuff. And I think that I would love to see their budget grow and the property that they're managing grow so that they can be building more units along the Beltline.
Thank you. Next question. What do you propose to do about the progressive deterioration of the City of Atlanta parks caused by inadequate maintenance funding across most of 2 decades? That is from a reader.
Thank you. We love to talk about building new green space in this town, but we have never talked about the fact that we do not maintain it. And when you look at the top 20 cities, we are at the absolute bottom of that list for the amount of money that we spend on parks maintenance. And it shows. And this is all the other thing that it kills me about this issue is we've created a real system of haves and have nots with green space. Like, unless you have a Friends of or a conservancy for green space in town, you're just not going to have the park maintained. And, you have Friends of and conservancies in the gentrified parts of town. And so it just exacerbates the inequities, the historic inequities. And so we've got to increase the park maintenance budget, period, full stop. And I think that we've got to do that through, currently we're using a sales tax option. I think that exploring whether or not we want to grow that is an important thing. And I also think that we need to just look at the general fund and see where we can increase the amount that we're going to spend. And if I could, last question was Beltline, so I just have to tie this here. So this is one of the crazy making things the city does. So the Beltline designs the parks around the loop, and they are doing a masterful job of native planting and planting for the climate and thinking about the changes there. And then they hand it over to the city to maintain. And the city Parks Department doesn't have the staff that knows how to maintain it, nor do they have the time or the budget to be able to do the work. And so if you've noticed on the East Side Trail, for instance, what was the way that the green space looked when it was first built, now it does not look like that anymore. That is why.
Thank you. Next question comes from a reader. What steps should the City of Atlanta take to best manage the likely continued growth via annexation into unincorporated DeKalb County. So, just as a little backstory, Atlanta, not too long ago, annexed Emory University and the attendant properties into the city of
Yeah.
Atlanta. Municipalization in DeKalb County, the idea that we'll all be in a city at some point, whether we want to be or not, is something that continues to come up with every legislative session. So I do think it's reasonable to expect that Atlanta will continue to annex some property that's in DeKalb County. So what say you? What steps can Atlanta take to manage those potential future annexations into DeKalb?
Well, the hard truth of annexing more residential is that the property taxes that come from just residential isn't enough to cover the services costs. And I think that's the hard thing that never gets talked about in this discussion. So, for instance, right now, Parkview really wants to be annexed into the city, and that's residential. And so we're just going to continue to tilt the scales by doing that. I would like to see the city continue to grow into DeKalb, and I do not know the answer to how we address this. But when I get to points where I don't know the answer, I consult people that are best practice, the experts in the issue area. I think that there are a lot of people in the city of like residents and like the chair of the Eastlake Neighborhood Association, for instance, who've already thought a lot about this, and I would seek their counsel as well as studying best practices from other cities about how to address this.
I'm smiling because my neighbor has a dog named Carson who's just outside barking, and I want to say,
Yeah,
Carson, you're gonna catch that burglar someday, buddy. I promise you.
yeah,
Your day, you're gonna have your day.
yes.
Anyway, so if you see my Zoom pop up and I'm just sitting here, it's because Carson is barking. Uh,
Thank you.
so next question from a reader. What are your proposals to improve the quality of sidewalks and other pedestrian infrastructure? And I know you did just touch on this in the question about Memorial Drive. So if you want to just reiterate some of that, and we'll quickly move on to the next question.
Yeah. I have become known as the sidewalk lady because I knock on doors every single day. And I just couldn't help myself when we came across bad stretches of sidewalk to document it. And so it's been fun to get my voice out there because bad sidewalks just drive me crazy. And but shining that real light showed me that like every street in this town has bad sidewalks. It's not just parts of town, it's every freaking street. And I think that the first and foremost thing is implementing participatory budgeting so that we can have a transparent process. And so what is participatory budgeting? It is a process by which we would go out at the neighborhood level. So I'm an Eastlake resident, so we would go out in Eastlake and we would say, here are the long list of infrastructure sidewalk projects in Eastlake. Let us rank order them. And after you prioritize them from the neighborhood, as well as get additional suggestions for which ones need fixing, then you price them out, you figure it out, you figure out where there's matching dollars to actually quantify the costs. And then you go back out to the community and say, okay, now let's choose, let's rank order them. And then I would use the discretionary budget at that the District 5 has to apply that to systematically going down that list to fix them. Second is working with the Atlanta Department of Transportation, as well as the Georgia Department of Transportation to be able to apply the dollars that they have against their priorities and get those done in an efficient and transparent manner. I invoked the words DeKalb Avenue at the beginning of this call. And I think it's a great example here too. Nobody believes DeKalb Avenue is ever actually getting fixed. We are a month and 10 days after when the round banking happened and there's no fixing it. And so that we've also just got to make it more transparent around how these infrastructure projects are working, and hold the staff of Public Works to the fire more to do what they say they're going to do.
Thank you. Um, Another question from a reader on Facebook. What is your approach to unkempt gas stations in the area and the lack of community informed businesses? For example, a third gas station has emerged on the Flat Shoals and Fayetteville corner without any community input or regulatory control.
Yeah. 2 words: code enforcement. So the city, since COVID, the code enforcement element has just vanished. They have sent people home and not brought them back to work, which I think is a real mistake. I think that we needed to have more essential workers back in the building at City Hall sooner, the way other businesses have done it. And secondly, code enforcement have said that they're only doing a set of activities that are the bare minimum and just letting everything else go. And so what we're experiencing with this gas station is a perfect example of where the city's abdicating its job. And I want to be hawkish with code enforcement and get them back to work. Now, let us also talk about the fact that code enforcement needs to be used for good and not evil. And one of the areas that code enforcement has been used for evil in this town is when you have an elderly resident who's not able to maintain their home, and there's a new giant house that goes in next to it, and the builder or whomever will call in code enforcement to put pressure on that resident. And I mean, that is just the lowest of the low to do that, rather than leaning into helping that resident be able to age in place and do the maintenance on their home, to call code enforcement. No, I am so against that. So we've got to use code enforcement for good and not evil.
Thank you. Last question, and then we're going to give you an opportunity to make a closing statement. Question from a reader. The reports and sounds of gun violence are all too frequent within the neighborhood. Understanding this incredibly complex nature of the problem, what can be done at the District 5 level to reduce violence?
Many of there are known offenders in each of the neighborhoods that APD talks about. And the neighbors are consistently frustrated at the hot spots that it continues to go on. And I don't think that we're having an honest enough conversation about those hot spots and what can and should be done. I think we've also got to tackle the huge problem that we do not have enough officers. So the city our size is supposed to have 2,100, and we're down to 1,300. And so one of the outgrowths of that is the problem that you're talking about, as well as the fact that right now it's an hour and a half to get anybody to respond from 911. And so this problem that is brought up is a real issue throughout District 5 that we've got to lean in and address at each specific hotspot area with APD and with the neighborhood patrols that exist in each of the neighborhoods, and the residents in the community as well. Whether it be putting pressure on the landlords, for instance, who are not doing their duty when they are renting to areas where the repeat drug and gun violence are, or if it is truly needing to bring in mental health support or substance abuse support. I think it's all of those things should be on the table.
Thank you. And that is the conclusion of today's forum. Mandy, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to make a brief closing statement, and then I'll have a few closing comments.
There was a question you didn't ask me that was on Facebook that I want to answer.
Okay.
Why do I not have the support of the Beltline Rail now? And I want to go on record to say that I believe we need transportation on the Beltline. I am not wed to it being heavy or light rail. And that is one of the areas that I differ from Beltline Rail now. I think that there are some tremendous solutions that are being employed in Canada and in Europe using light duty autonomous shuttle type, or light duty autonomous shuttles. That's what they are, that provide circulator services. And at the end of the day, the Beltline is a circulator. And I would love to see us employ these vehicles because they're so much more cost effective. They're so much easier to get on the road, just like bus rapid transit is, because you don't have to go through all the federal permitting. You can use existing infrastructure. The vehicles themselves are a lot cheaper, and they can run more frequently. And isn't that what we need on the Beltline? Frequent travel that can be accommodated within the infrastructure and is that we can pay for and get done quickly. And so, I call us to look at leading edge solutions for the Beltline, to not just be stuck in an idea that was a good one 15 years ago. And so that's where I stand on that.
Okay. Did you want to make a closing statement as well, or are you going to let
My
me go?
closing statement is I love Atlanta. I love District 5. I am a policy wonk through and through, as I think that this forum has shown. I love to go deep and wide, but most importantly, I love holding up the voices of people in the community that have passion and vision for what needs to change, and to create the space to let their voices radiate through so that we can bring durable, lasting change to our community. And I ask for your support. I ask for you to join me. I ask for your vote on November 30th. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mandy, for taking time out of your day to join us and talk directly to voters. That's very important, and it is appreciated. This is the Decatorish.com Twitch show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. This is the last forum we are doing pertaining to the recent elections. The runoff election for Atlanta City Council District 5 is going to be November 30th, and early voting is going to be November 17th. You're going to find all the information about that at decaturishvotes.com. Also, a recording of this is going to be uploaded to the Decatorish YouTube channel, so just search for Decatorish on YouTube, and it should pull it right up. If you appreciate this opportunity, I need you to go visit. There's a little ad right there for supportmylocalnews.com. I'm not gonna lie, we have not grown the number of supporters that I hoped we would grow. We're hanging in at about 1,500, which is a great number. That actually allowed us to hire our first full-time reporter this year. So, I've made good on the promises that I've made to paying supporters in terms of using that to broaden and expand our coverage, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. But we cannot continue to provide news for free at this quality and depth without additional support from our readers. I just can't do it. So, if you value local news, if you value having the contributions that we make to our public discourse in our community, I encourage you to please go and visit supportmylocalnews.com. Become a paying supporter today. You can do that for as little as $3 a month. You get a cool e-edition every month. You get some other opportunities. We just had a recent giveaway for a violin concert at the Swartz Center. We originally were going to give out 8 tickets. We had so much interest. We worked with our community partner there, and we gave away 39 tickets. 39 people who support us are going to get this opportunity to do this cool free event. We're going to hopefully do more of that in the near future. We will be back. I've had a little trouble, I guess, because it's the holidays, getting some guests lined up. I do intend to resume our regular schedule soon, so hopefully we can have a show next Wednesday. Until we meet again, this is the Decatorish.com Twitch show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher Dan Wisenhunt. Enjoy. Oh, real quick, I'm getting my son vaccinated today. He's 6. The vaccines are out there, people. They're out there for you, and they're out there for your kids. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I'm sick of the pandemic. I'm sick of dealing with this crap. Please go get vaccinated. It's safe. The science backs it up. The vaccines are free and plentiful. Call your pediatrician today and get your kids vaccinated, y'all, so we can move past this and so they can hug grandma on Christmas and Thanksgiving without worrying about making her sick. So that's my other sermon for today. Until then, until we see you again, uh, enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. Get vaccinated. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye bye, everybody.